Ivory Coast is the sixth in a growing list of African nations cutting military ties with former colonial power France. In his 2024 end-of-year address to the country on December 31st, President Alassane Ouattara said the Ivorian government had decided to expel French troops because the Ivorian army is now effective. The president did not give any other reasons. So, is France a freak ending? And why is there a sudden urge to cut military ties with France? Here is our cover report. French military troops who have been in Ivory Coast for decades will soon be leaving, signaling more diplomatic setbacks for France amid local resentment that has caused one-time allies in West and Central Africa to sever ties with Paris. President Alassane Ouattara's recent announcement puts Ivory Coast on a growing list of African countries cutting military ties with the once greatly influential former colonial power, as some former French allies also turn to Russian mercenaries for help fighting a swarm of armed groups in the region.
We have decided on the concerted and organized withdrawal of French forces from Ivory Coast. As a result, the 43rd Bima Marine Infantry Battalion at Port Pouet will be handed back to Ivory Coast Armed Forces from January 2025.
Within days of each other in November, Chad and Senegal expelled French troops, joining several Sahel countries that had earlier done the same, starting in 2021. The wave of pushback has forced France to devise a new military strategy for the continent that officials say will be in line with the needs of partner countries. Temporary deployments rather than permanent military presence and more focus on training local forces are some features of the new policy. The 43rd Marine Infantry Battalion, Bima, a French army base located in the economic capital Abidjan, will be handed over to the Ivorian military starting from January 2025. French soldiers have been helping the Ivorian army in the fight against armed groups operating in the Sahel and expanding into countries along the Gulf of Guinea, including Ivory Coast and Ghana. France also operated as part of a United Nations peacekeeping mission during the country's long civil war from 2002 to 2011. Analysts say Ouattara's decision to cut military ties could also be political as Ivorians gear up for general elections slated for October. Ouattara, who has been in power since 2010, has not yet said whether he will seek a fourth term in the polls.
To mark this new stage in our army's life, I have decided to name this camp after General Wataha Thoma Dakkian, a soldier with an exceptional career and the first ever Chief of Staff of the Ivorian Army.
France has faced unprecedented, bitter criticism from citizens in its former colonies in West and Central Africa in recent years. From Mali to Ivory Coast, thousands of people have taken to the streets in mass protests demanding that their governments cut ties with Paris for good. By January 2025, 6 African countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Senegal, and now Ivory Coast, had cut military ties with France.
I have instructed the Minister for the Armed Forces to propose a new doctrine for cooperation in defense and security, involving, among other consequences, the end of all foreign military presences in Senegal from 2025.
France maintains a large military base in Djibouti, Eastern Africa. The country, also a former colony of France, hosts close to 1,500 French troops and is one of France's largest overseas military contingents. In West and Central Africa, France continues to remain a small presence in Gabon, where it has about 300 troops. Gabon's army seized power in a coup in August 2023, ending 5 years of the Bongo family's rule. However, unlike other military-led countries in the region, Paris has maintained ties with Gabon's military government, likely because of the resentment the ruling family drew. Africa Bureau, WION, World is One. Several youths reported missing in Kenya were freed from their captors and discovered in towns across the country. The releases follow pressure from activists demanding justice for those who disappeared after criticizing President William Ruto's governance and alleged corruption. The incidents are part of a pattern of alleged police killings, abductions and illegal detentions related to anti-government protests that began in June 2024. Rights groups accuse Kenyan authorities of covering up dozens of such cases. The Kenyan government has promised to investigate, denying involvement. Here's a report.
These scenes have rocked Kenya's capital Nairobi ever since late December last year. Police in Kenya's capital Nairobi fired tear gas to disperse protesters demonstrating against what they say is a wave of unexplained abductions of government critics. Dozens of Kenyans have been abducted in recent months, according to human rights groups who blame the extrajudicial arrest on Kenya's police and intelligence services.
I'm here as a parent. Please, I'm begging. I have cried enough. I do not have strength. I feel like dying.
Security forces in the East African nation have been accused of carrying out dozens of illegal detentions since youth-led anti-government demonstrations in June and July. The latest disappearances have primarily involved young people who have criticized President William Ruto online, with rights groups dismissing police denials of involvement and calling for action.
After the financing protest of June, that is when this started. The crackdown that the government started, when the president went out on national television and said that he's going to go after the people who went to parliament, who invaded parliament. That is when the abductions kicked off. That is when they intensified. We believe it's the directive of the government.
This lifestyle of being abducted should have ended in the 90s. And with our current constitution, as young people, we understand our constitution and we have every right in terms of freedom of expression and association and gathering.
And amidst the protests, a damning report by Reuters emerged where the agency revealed how Kenya police covered up killings of anti-government protesters. In Kenya, morgue logbooks record the cause of death reported by police when they bring in bodies. With public pathologists usually only performing autopsies once bodies are identified by relatives. Relatives describe discrepancies between the causes of death recorded by the police in morgue logbooks and the autopsy reports in 3 of the cases. Some prominent rights groups have accused Kenyan authorities of a cover-up of dozens of alleged police killings, unexplained abductions and illegal detentions related to the protests, which became known popularly as the Gen Z protests because of their youthful demographic.
It is required by law that where we are implicated as police, we don't investigate ourselves. It has to be done by an independent oversight authority.
They abduct people in a very violent, very threatening or scary way, and then they don't even take them to police stations. So in the first place, those things should not be happening. But because it has happened, we need accountability.
Police have denied involvement, but activists have questioned why they appear to not be investigating the disappearances. Human Rights Watch said earlier this year that its research pointed towards a unit drawn from multiple security agencies. Africa Bureau, WION, World is One.
Jesus, I give you this, I give you this, I give you in peace.
Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has approved a law that abolishes the death penalty in the southern African state with immediate effect. Rights group Amnesty International hailed the decision as a beacon of hope for the abolitionists movement in the region, but expressed regret that the death penalty could be reinstated during a state of emergency. Here's a report.
The president's move comes after Zimbabwe's parliament voted earlier last December to scrap the death penalty. Zimbabwe last carried out an execution by hanging in 2005, but its courts continue to hand down the death sentence for serious crimes like murder. About 60 people were on death row at the end of 2023, according to Amnesty. They will be resentenced by the courts, with judges ordered to consider the nature of their crime, the time they spent on death row, and their personal circumstances. The death sentence was introduced in what is now Zimbabwe during British colonial rule. Mnangagwa has been a long-standing critic of capital punishment, citing his own experience of being sentenced to death in the 1960s for blowing up a train during the guerrilla war for independence. His sentence was later commuted to 10 years in prison.
We applaud the government for taking this important step in terms of aligning our laws to international standards. You may be aware that the optional protocol on the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights provides for the abolition of the death penalty. So this step is also a step towards aligning our laws to international standards.
I think a man or a woman should just die a natural death. If he has committed a crime that deserves death sentence, I think it's better for that person to stay so long in prison than having him killed or having a death sentence.
Amnesty said the move was not just great progress for Zimbabwe, but also a major milestone in international efforts to end this ultimate cruel, inhuman and degrading punishment. Mnangagwa's ZANU-PF party has ruled Zimbabwe since independence in 1980. It has repeatedly been accused by opposition and rights groups of ruling with an iron fist in its bid to remain in power. According to Amnesty, globally 113 countries, including 24 in Africa, have fully abolished the death penalty. Africa Bureau, WION World is One.
Outgoing Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo left a gift for the continent. He says all African passport holders are now able to visit Ghana without needing a visa. He announced the plan in his final State of the Nation address, where he said that the policy had come into effect at the beginning of the year. Visa-free travel within the continent has long been an aspiration for those promoting Pan-African values and is seen as vital for economic cooperation. Here's a report from Accra.
All African passport holders are now able to visit Ghana without needing a visa. Outgoing President Nana Akufo-Addo announced the plan last December, but in his final State of the Nation address, he said that the policy had come into effect at the beginning of the year. Visa-free travel within the continent has long been an aspiration for those promoting Pan-African values and is seen as vital for economic cooperation. Ghana is now the 5th African country to offer this to travelers from the rest of the African continent. Rwanda, Seychelles, the Gambia and Benin are others.
I'm proud to have approved visa-free travel to Ghana for all African passport holders with effect from the beginning of this year. This is the logical next step to the African Continental Free Trade Area and the workings of the largest trading bloc in the world.
In an annual African ranking of visa openness, Ghana was placed 5th last year, as it already offered visa-free travel to citizens of 26 continental countries. In recent years, Ghana has been promoting itself as a destination for people from the continent and the African diaspora to visit. In 2019, Akufo-Addo launched the Year of Return, an initiative to encourage those with African roots to invest in the country. In the living room of their home, Keachia Bowers and Damon Smith play a card game with their 2 children as the family dog chases a toy. It's a scene reminiscent of the life they left behind in Florida, but the entire family moved to Ghana in 2023, seeking out a country where they felt more belonging. Bowers and Smith are 2 of the 524 members of the global black diaspora who got citizenship of Ghana in a ceremony in November. Bowers says that though her and her family were able to live in Ghana without many obstacles, having the citizenship is important to her.
I am an African woman just because how do we identify who we are? You look at your skin, right? So I didn't need that to tell me that I'm African. Anywhere that I go in the world and someone looks at me, I'm melanated. But my ancestors who wanted to return and come back home, those ancestors who never made it back, their dying wish was to come back to their home and they never made it. That passport for me is for them.
The joy that people feel in finding connections that were broken long ago is palpable. Videos of the recent citizenship ceremony show men and women of all ages waving the Ghanaian flag and cheering. Dija Gordon was one of them. She first visited Ghana in 2015 and moved permanently in 2019, opening up a food truck that sells Jamaican food.
It just feels good to have a connection to an African country as an African American, as a Black American, right? Because back in America, we don't have anything to trace our roots to but Africa. And to have that connection here, I feel like, again, I've done something right.
Ghana's government, in part, describes the program as a benefit to the economy and focuses on investment opportunities for those wishing to relocate. Ghana has granted citizenship to hundreds of people from the black diaspora so far. Having served 2 terms already, Akufo-Addo was unable to run for re-election last month. But the man his party chose to succeed him, Vice President Mahamudu Bawumia, lost by a large margin to John Mahama. Africa Bureau, WION, World is One.
Morocco is working to secure a place for the Cfan on UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage list. The Cfan, a traditional garment renowned for its luxurious fabrics and cultural significance, will be considered during the 47th session of the UNESCO World Heritage Committee in Bulgaria later this year.
The Moroccan kaftan is always evolving, and since the demand for it is large and high, the traditional Moroccan craftsman always tries to innovate and create new shapes and types. And this is what made us introduce modernity to the kaftan. But the traditional character always remains, especially in the sfifa, skali and hand embroidery. And this is what makes it maintain the Moroccan character.
The Moroccan kaftan is distinguished by a unique feature that distinguishes it from the rest of the Arab and Islamic countries, especially in the Islamic West. And this feature is what Morocco takes the step in order to register the kaftan on the UNESCO Intangible Heritage List.
From South Africa to Nigeria, different nations had their own unique way of ushering in 2025. Most of them organized festivals and carnivals like the Minstrel Carnival in Cape Town and the Fanti Festival in Lagos. Check this out.
Thousands of colorfully costumed minstrels paraded through Cape Town Saturday in an exuberant century-old carnival rooted in the South African city's history of slavery that drew large crowds of spectators. In glitzy uniforms matched with flashy hats, parasols and face paint, the marchers walked and danced through the city's historic center in an annual event that an organizer said had grown to become the biggest such parade on the continent.
Not all the history reflects, of course, in our history books. So we need to have events like this where we can celebrate culture and, of course, understand what has transpired and the lessons that we can learn from that as we navigate our way towards that shared future.
And in the west of the continent, Nigerians ushered in 2025 with a festival of their own. Lagos Island erupted in a pre-dawn spectacle of color and culture as the historic Fanti Carnival takes to the streets of Nigeria's commercial hub. The Lagos Fanti Carnival is a 19th century tradition brought by returnees from Brazil and Cuba, making it a unique fusion of two continents' cultural heritage.
We are celebrating it because it's a new beginning. We want to start afresh. We have done a lot of things in the past. So we are using this opportunity to unite ourselves, to try to look for something even more better.
Festivals are not rare on the continent. It's an annual event that draws crowds in most cases to welcome a new year or season. The highly anticipated New Year parade celebrates Cape Town's mixed-raced community descended from slaves brought from Africa, Southwest Asia and Indian Ocean territories after the city was settled by the Dutch in the 1650s. Africa Bureau, WION, World is One.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of Wild of Africa. You know the drill. Tell us what you would like to see on the show. Tell us your story. Reach out to us on all our social media platforms. See you on the next show. I'm Eric Njoka. Kwaheri.
India's Global Voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is One.
UOne Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to UOne Health Resort. Make your reservation at yoone.com.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?